Hello, everybody. It's good to see you. My name is Leah Reis-Dennis. I'm the head of podcasts at Audacy. And I have with me Caitlin, Dan, and Max. This is going to be a great conversation. We don't have a ton of time, so I think we'll just get right into it. And if you guys want to give a little bit more background of exactly what you do as we get into the questions, we can. How about that? Okay. So I would like to start with Dan. Dan is the CEO of Oxford Road. Oxford Road represents a lot of brands you've heard in a lot of podcasts. Ball & Branch, Shopify, DraftKings, Quince, Chime, Acorns, Chewy, Fabletics, the list goes on and on. When you look at where podcast spending is, Dan, relative to actual audience time spent, what's the gap and why has it persisted?
The gap's pretty significant. If you look at the time that consumers spend with digital media and what share of that time is spent with podcasting, it's about 5% of their time is spent with podcasting. About 0.8% of the advertising spend in digital media is with podcasting. So you've got about a 6-to-1 ratio that podcasting is actually undervalued based on the time that consumers spend with it. If you were to compare that to all media, it would be more like 8-to-1. So the channel is wildly undervalued. Why is it so undervalued? And I guess I would say, just to fatten the calf a little bit, it's actually a better form of media for every type of impression anyway, because with podcasting, most of the impressions are actually from the voice of a host. So it's already endorsed. There's already a level of trust that's even kind of strange that we even compare it on a CPM basis, apples to apples, with everywhere that you just traffic a commercial message. So you're not even necessarily talking about apples to apples on what the even unit that we're talking about is. But if we're going to normalize it, you're 6 to 8x off of the relative value of regular media. And so why is it so undervalued when we all love podcasts, right? Like, I'll bet most people in this room love a podcast, maybe many podcasts. So why doesn't it get its fair share of the money? We haven't helped ourselves as an industry to make it very easy to do business with us. If you think about it, the measurement gaps, the fact that you can have one show that is distributed with, you buy a sponsorship of an episode, part of that distribution is through an RSS feed, which you can pixel, and then another part goes on YouTube for a big part of the consumption. You have to have a totally different measurement methodology. And so you've got to work really hard to have a framework that can kind of normalize and capture all that. The other thing to consider, and I think this is more of a feature than a bug, but it does make it a more complex channel to enter into, is that you're dealing with tribes. And you're dealing with, this isn't like, this isn't something that, yes, you can buy it programmatically, but podcasting at its best is about you entering into a community that somebody's actually built from the ground up based on an affinity, based on trust, and based on expertise or passion. And you're walking into this tribe and you're saying, okay, I want to find the chief of this tribe, and I want them to be an advocate, to actually put their name and their reputation and the trust that they've built with their audience on the line on behalf of your brand. Now, that's a much more powerful form of media than what you can get almost anywhere else. And it's different than, what we call influencer media and other forms, because it's longer form. The trust is deeper. You can actually explain something. But the problem is that takes time. And every one of these tribes kind of has its own cultural nuances. And if you don't have somebody, like Max, who knows the creator intimately and is actually, speaks the language of that tribe and that culture to kind of be an ambassador for you. And if you don't have an agency like Oxford Road that actually has been spending, a decade or more building relationships, which each of these little micro cultures, is very, very hard to scale this efficiently. So it's not like buying IG or Facebook or whatever that you can just dial up and dial down and it's all just the algorithm. This thing takes a lot of bespoke work, and it can be very arduous, but the value is there, and it's amazing how big the opportunity is.
So I want to dig into a lot of what you just said with Caitlin and Max, and I'll start with Caitlin. So for those brands who are not yet committed in podcasting, but who are intrigued by it, who are bumping up against some of the issues that Dan just pointed out, what's the fastest way you've seen a brand get over their hesitation to start investing in podcasting?
I think at this point, podcasting isn't new anymore. We've proven out the medium. So we know that you can advertise in it and you can scale your brand and you can grow your business via podcasting. So I think that takes out a little bit of the hesitation that we may have had 5-10 years ago when you first entered the space. While measurement still can be perfected, there is measurement there. So you are able to use pixels to sort of close the loop on a sale. And we have tons of case studies that show, customer acquisition goes up when you invest in podcasting. Brand loyalty goes up when you invest in podcasting. So I think, while there is a diner menu of podcasts out there, there's thousands and thousands and more keep entering the space. And that could be a little bit of, it could scare, a new buyer. Also, even just shifting your media mix. Like if you're working in traditional television or traditional audio and you don't want to rock the boat and test out podcasting, at least right now we have proven success there and you can feel confident in making that choice.
Totally. And I know a lot of brands who are interested in diving into the creator economy, and that's something that Max and PAVE PAVE is really based on that idea. So Max, how do you help a brand think about buying a creator ecosystem versus just buying a show?
Yeah, so, first, maybe just PAVE. So PAVE is a studio. We own our IP. We launch new shows with creators. And I've been in podcasting for 10 years. I previously had a company that I sold to Spotify, ran Spotify podcasts, and now going to do this for a second time. So there's a lot of things you just touched on around measurement that I think is so important that we'll get back to a little later. In terms of how PAVE is set up, there's now millions of podcasts, right? There's 6 million on Spotify. There's literally thousands every day being created. The way that we think about it is we have to be genre specific with our creators. So under PAVE, we've launched a brand called Crime House, which is our crime brand that reaches, 50 million plus on social. That's reaching millions and more on audio and video, long form. And it allows us, because we control the IP and work so intimately with creators. I mean, they're in our studios producing with us. We have a team of pre-production, post-production, etc., to really come up with really creative ideas with brands. And so, it could be something like today we had a horror movie just came out and all of our creators actually worked together to promote it in a really interesting way, where it was an Instagram reel where they're talking about the movie and how excited they are for it, and it's in our set, and it brings cohesion across the Crime House brand. So when you work with PAVE, in this case in Crime House specifically, you're not just getting one show, you're getting a franchise of different shows that can amplify it even more. And that's something we're really, leaning into more because it is our unique advantage in the space.
Right. So 1 + 1 = 3 or 4.
I mean, yeah, 1 + 1 needs to equal 3 for us. Hopefully it equals 4 or 5. And we're seeing that. And the undertone was the movie, and it's like it really worked, I think, for them, and it got a lot of interesting engagement on social. But also what we can do with that, whether it be like a brand like Quince, is okay. So they're going to be on the podcast doing a host read read. Now they're on their YouTube channel, and the hosts are wearing Quince, and now let's do a 360 and put it on Instagram or TikTok, etc. It just lends itself so much more. And the one thing that we think a lot about is in the aggregate we're reaching millions of people, but there's also shows that are really important around having, if they even have smaller audience size, because they probably have bigger engagement. And I think that's something that we should always think about, because the metrics do get skewed now. It's easy on YouTube, for example, to get a lot of views. Doesn't mean that content is relevant, doesn't mean it's going to convert. So what is sticky, and how do we think do we invest in that as well?
Right, and we see that all the time, that the most success doesn't always come from the biggest shows. It often comes from the niche communities that have really high engagement and really massive amounts of trust in their hosts. So can you, anybody who wants to, speak to that a little bit? Why is it that niche audiences are often outperforming mass media?
Well, I think, it comes down to this tribe and this community. If you go back to podcasting, historically, it was a very intimate format. It was the host became your best friend. You're walking, you're doing errands, you are cleaning the dishes, and you have your earpods on, your headphones on, I should say, and you're just listening at time and time again. It becomes part of your routine that really you build this intimacy and this connection unlike any other media. Now you layer that on with video and social, and all of a sudden your community is able to see like behind the scenes into your life. That is very, very powerful. And so I think that if you are a certain show that's reaching 30,000 people weekly, which is relatively, small, that could be really impactful. Some of these shows are doing live tours because they're reaching people that want to see them, they want to understand, they have the perspective. And so for us at PAVE, while we strive to, launch the biggest shows, mostly in the millions, we do think a lot about what does a 30,000, 50,000 download podcast and view look like? Because I do think there's a special type of engagement that happens there that starts to get lost. When you're Joe Rogan and you're reaching millions and millions of people, how many are really going to, how many are there for just entertainment versus I'm here for Joe and I believe him 100% is something we think a lot about.
Dan, you want to?
Yeah, I'll jump on that. So we've got a system where we basically took, at Oxford Road, we took hundreds of advertisers we've worked with over the years and $1.6 billion of performance data. We aggregated it, we normalized it across all different industries and categories, and we looked at it and said, okay, how do you figure out, how can we score a show to see how likely it is to perform for an advertiser? And then we are able to rank them on a relative basis, right? And we've got thousands of shows in this thing. And in many cases, double-digit examples of advertisers in each show. So we get a really good idea of its impact. 80% of the top-performing podcasts in our database are independent. They're not the usual suspects. And by independent, basically what that means is it's not, it's not a big Spotify-owned show. It's not owned and operated. There's creative control, even if there might be a sales partnership with an Audacy or something like that. But really, based on the fact that they have creative control, they don't have to run the maximum number of ad units. The bigger it is, a lot of times you have, it's starting to sound like terrestrial radio again with 20 ads an hour. Who likes that in their podcast? Anybody? Yeah, there you go. So, the more commercial it gets, the more they turn it into radio, a lot of times the value gets diluted, right? And so with these niche shows, Max was talking about the affinity. I think sometimes you feel a little bit more passionate about something that's not as famous. It's not Smartless necessarily, but it's somebody where you really feel like you know the host, and you might email them, they might email you back, right? It's really a community. It's a tribe. And so I think that passion scales. I also think the CPMs are lower because bigger brands pay premiums for names that they've heard of. And so they don't have to worry about evaluating 1,000 different niche audiences. If you can just do it at once, that saves you time. So you spend more money on that. But in reality, there's a big value disparity. And that's why I think the long tail works a lot better. And even though, we're spending over $500 million a year right now in media, with podcasts being the largest share of that. So we work with everybody, but certainly those smaller shows, we always see a better bang for your buck. And oftentimes it just comes down to the simple fact that the talent will work a little harder because they have to.
Yeah, so Caitlin, Oxford Road is working on finding these high ROI niche shows, and Audacy is representing networks at scale. So how do those two approaches work together for a brand?
So I think you can actually do both. And I think there's a way to maximize the channel utilizing the niche communities with the host read, because of course that at its core is how podcasts were built and the beauty of advertising with them. But there's also something to be said for the value that can come from amplifying your brand message across an entire network portfolio. And I think those two can work in tandem. Let's say you're trying to target a millennial mom, like hands up, me. I'd work with, the buying team at Oxford, and we'd try to identify shows where we think that consumer is going to be. I'd likely recommend Max's suite of shows because guilty, love true crime. But then I think there's something to be said for advertising across an entire network and targeting those millennial moms wherever they're listening. So, you might find one listening to a sports show or something that you might not have thought to advertise in. And it's a way of sort of capturing your listener wherever they are, while also coupling that with the benefits of doing a host read.
So let's dig into the host read piece further. Max, you mentioned brand integrations that go beyond a standard host read. creators wearing a brand, building into a show, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about an example of one of those that's worked well for you, perhaps even with a Oxford Road brand sold by Audacy?
Yeah, well, I think, we can talk about Quince. I sort of already talked about it in the previous one, but I think, for us, it's like we just really want to talk with our hosts and understand what brands they use on a day-to-day basis and give that information actually back to Audacy, who represents Crime House. And then that way they can go out to the Oxford Roads of the world and make sure that we're aligning. And so anytime that we are able to do something that isn't just a host read is really, really important to me. The bottom line is podcasting. What is a podcast anymore? We say shows at our company because we are creating attention, and that attention is across social, that is across YouTube, and that is across audio. And what creators need now more than ever, as the space has gotten a lot more complicated, is they need help. So when a creator comes to us, whether it's a distribution, a monetization, or whether it's an original show, we have that infrastructure to put them all together, package them with their other creators, ideally, that elevate their audience through collabs, and then work with a brand like a Quince where we can go deeper than just, hey, here's a $25 CPM post-read ad. That's fine. We love that. Thank you. But also there's an opportunity to go a lot deeper, and that's really what we strive to do.
And how does video expand that picture? I mean, you've talked about how video is this massive revenue opportunity. Where are we in that, and how can we improve that?
Yeah, video is amazing. So if you think about where podcasting is right now, and I saw this with my previous company, Parcast, at that time there was no dynamic ad insertion. So it was a completely different, and the measurement was horrible then. So if it's not great now, 10 years ago it was even worse. What video is doing is going to be able to track measurement that much better. It's going to level up the whole entire buying community. If you think about podcasting right now, about a $2.4 to $2.5 billion ad industry, $7.3 billion if you include subscriptions and other sort of things. Video is obviously much bigger than that. I believe it's around 63 billion. So all of a sudden now we have creators that are launching successful YouTube channels because that's primarily where it is being consumed. You have Apple that just announced a couple weeks ago that they're going to be integrating video into Apple Podcasts, which is a huge development that we're learning more about. I think they're doing some sort of keynote actually tomorrow. And then you have, of course, Spotify that's also announced dynamic ad insertion, which is a big thing for podcasters that want to continue to use RSS and understand their metrics. And so when you have the three biggest platforms, and by the way, YouTube is now unveiling dynamic ads as well in the coming months, all investing in video products that will ultimately be better for measurement, but also create more monetization opportunities and put more money in the pockets of creators, that's a huge deal. And I just think, podcasting today, to your point, is the most undervalued asset in media. And it's really about to show, I think, over the next 3 years.
So you mentioned attribution. Dan, a lot of the attribution that we talk about now didn't exist 5 years ago. What are the metrics that should matter most to a CMO or marketer sitting in this room and evaluating a podcast investment? And what is the industry doing to push towards standardization around measurement writ large?
I wish it weren't "it depends" for the first part, but I'll just try to give you like the short list. Because look, if you're selling a Harley Davidson, I don't know that it's going to work for you to like use a promo code at checkout, right? That's maybe not going to be your best bet. However, I will say this, like if you have the ability to transact digitally, do everything that you can to get a "how did you hear about us" survey in your flow. Or if you're capturing emails, maybe post-purchase surveys. How did you hear about us? Even if 5% of the audience responds and you hit critical mass, you can extrapolate and you can get really good data just from asking the customers. So I think that's part one. We put out a white paper a couple of years ago for those that can engage digitally and do the survey. Please don't use vanity URLs. I don't ever think you need to hear another vanity URL on a podcast ever. And what you can do is if you're going to survey people, when you ask them, "How did you hear about us?" and they say podcast, go, "Great. Which podcast?" "Thank you." "Yes." And then using predictive text, they can put in 3 letters, prompt pops up, they can screw up the spelling, whatever, you still capture them. So if you can, please do that. Because while we're trying to get our shit together, frankly, as an industry, and trying to get YouTube and Apple and Spotify to all row in the same direction, and when we will be able to pixel and protect user privacy and everything that's important, we're working on that. And I will say we have the right people's attention. They are sitting at the table, they are engaging, but I can't promise anything yet. But I will tell you, until then, that's your best case scenario. Otherwise, you're going to have to do an MMM, but that's not going to give you show level data. So the best thing that you can do is try to do pixels where you can on a show by show basis and triangulate for the gaps. But do not imagine that the distribution points for what you're sponsoring is comprehensive with what you can pixel, because it's going to be a fraction. The video, we have a big video bottleneck, and even the precision around pixeling is not perfect. So there's no right answer. It's hard. That's part of the reason that there's so much value in this channel. But, you know, you have to go to war with the army you have, not the army you want, and it depends on where you're at. Now, to answer the question about where's it going, like I said, like we are kind of dragging everybody to the table and getting all the different major stakeholder groups to sit down, and there are things I can't announce publicly right now, but I hope that by July, we do a big event for brands. We call it the CAO, we call it Chief Audio Officer, but there's so much video, we're going to think about a rebrand. But we do a summit where we get about 75 brands to a resort at the Terranea Resort in LA, kind of talking to each other and sharing knowledge. We're going to try to have some big updates on where we're getting the industry to move with attribution. We have a task force of the right people working on this. We're talking to the IAB very closely to stay in step with something that's going to have some standards that'll help us all into the future. But we're just not there yet.
Okay, so in the meantime, while we wait for Dan's big July announcement, Caitlin, for a brand that is today nervous about measurement, what does a first campaign look like with clear KPIs? You know, how do you set expectations up front and walk them through that?
So I think for performance advertisers, one of the bigger hurdles they have to get over is understanding that this isn't the same as their traditional digital advertising. You're not just buying an impression, you're really buying into the host, you're buying into the channel. So I would say you have to level set to have a little bit of patience, at least in the beginning. That first month is more brand awareness, getting listeners familiar with your brand, aligned with the host, and repetition is really key. So over time, that's where you start seeing, oh, did they show up to my website? Oh, did they download the app? Oh, did they eventually purchase the product? But I think at first, you just need to understand that you're buying into a really niche community. You're buying into the fandom behind podcasts, and results will come later once that trust is built between your brand, the host, and the audience.
Awesome. I want to close by asking everyone a quick lightning round with some final questions, and then we'll take some Q&A. Dan, if a CMO in this room has been sitting on the sidelines, what's the one thing you would tell them to do in the next 30 days to dive right in with podcasts?
Don't. Until you're ready. Because I think what happens is you get a lot of people dipping their toe in going, we're going to check the podcast. I love podcasts. Why aren't we on my favorite podcasts? And then you tell your buyer to go check the box. They will dutifully check the box. You will see zero impact because you're not ready for what you're about to experience. This is not a vacation. This is Burning Man. You need to prepare for this. Don't just show up half-heartedly. You need to be serious about this. Please. Don't show up at our little, it's nicer than Burning Man when you get there, but don't come to our little beach town as a tourist here. We got a good thing going. Don't screw it up by flooding it with pre-produced ads and a bunch of box checking that's just going to piss you off and not get renewed. Come when you're ready to get serious, when you're ready to engage with the culture, when you've got interpreters who are able to go and speak the language of each of these little tribes and figure out all the weird nuance and all the internal battles you're going to have to fight just to measure the damn thing. Don't half-ass it. If you're going to come properly with the right team around you and come with a commitment to make this work and burn your ships. Don't come like it's going to be easy, because it's not. But the value is there. And if you're serious about it, we'd love to talk. Because there's a world of opportunity for people that are ready to treat it with the respect it deserves.
Okay, well, burn your ships. Max, the creator economy, high bar.
Yeah, it's a really high bar.
So,
Football
Max,
coach.
we have
Run
the
through the wall
creator,
for you over here.
We have the creator economy and we have the podcast economy. Those are more and more converging. PAVE is at the forefront of that. What is the version of this channel that we're building towards? And how do brands who want in on both channels get ahead of it now?
Yeah, I mean, podcasting and the creator economy, they're one and the same. All of our creators reach millions of people on social, YouTube, and audio. So the way that I think about it is you buy into a podcast, you buy into the long form, right, of that, which is probably the most intimate, deep relationship. And you're able to extend that across reach, across social, as well as video and extras. So for me, I don't think of it as a podcast, like the podcast space anymore. I think we are the creator economy. And that's been really helpful to, I think, brands, but also just the way the creators think of it. Because a lot of creators also were saying, like, oh my God, a podcast, 45 minutes, can I do that? Well, it's just an extension of what you're doing, and that's why we exist.
Caitlin, for brands who are ready to go all in and burn all their ships, brands still may not know exactly where to start. So in terms of thinking about baby steps, once a brand is ready, what's the first thing to do?
Call Dan. No, but seriously, if you're gonna take the leap into a brand new medium, learn it first. I would say listen to a few podcasts, not necessarily the ones that you like, but the ones that you think your consumer is listening to. Get a feel for the hosts, what type of reads they're doing, see which ones feel authentic, see which ones, feel like they're being forced, and get a feel for the space first, because you want to be able to come in educated and, to Dan's point, ready, because it's such a powerful platform, but it has to be done the right way, not necessarily through a programmatic buy. You want to buy into these podcasts because you want their niche fandom, their communities, and really you're buying the host. So make sure, you're well versed on that.
Awesome. Any questions?
80 or 90 brands right now, and I'm trying to think of okay, I love them all, right, equally. I think Shopify's doing a great job, and I think they've really used this channel to show impact. We were talking about Quince earlier. I think brands that are able to find the link between the host and an authentic story they're able to tell about the brand. So if you're a podcaster and you've got a merch store, set it up on Shopify, right? And then you're demonstrating the best shows, whether it's a deep integration or whether it's just how you use the ad time. You want the ad to be a demonstration of how you authentically engage with the product. If it's Quince, we use Quince for merch, to make merch at Oxford Road, right? And so there's an opportunity in that to actually be shopping. I have a ton of Quince in my closet. My wife does too. And to be able to talk about something that you would use, I think is the kind of the main heart of the medium, right? And so don't forget about that endorsement. And I think it sounds so obvious, but it's harder when you get into the kind of manufacturing process. That authenticity is the whole thing, right? And how do you find someone that really believes in what you are doing? And they're out there, right? And there's thousands or hundreds or something, but there's enough people that can really speak as a firsthand testimonial and talk about how they do it and why they believe in it. And I think when you can have that happen in a real way and there's value alignment between your brand and the values of the content, I think that's lightning in a bottle.
I'm so sorry to say that we're actually out of time, but we'll hang out here. So if anybody has more questions, we're happy to chat downstairs. Thanks, everyone.